With the recent announcement of a new mainline Pokemon Legends game dropping in 2025, I thought it would be a good idea to have a look back at the offerings the Switch has had so far. I have liked all the mainline games the Switch has had, but can admit that they've all had their shortcomings too. So here is my personal rankings of the current mainline core Pokemon games for the Nintendo Switch. Starting off at number 5, and this one might come as no surprise, is Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. These are remakes of the original DS versions of Generation 4 which were released in 2006. These are good games and faithful remakes of the originals with a few improvements here and there, including some travel speed increases and how fast taking damage is in comparison to the older games, and also the remastered soundtrack. However, the biggest gripe most fans of the series have is the art style and the look. To be honest, this didn't bother me too much, but when compared to the previous games, it does feel like a bit of a step back. The battles are fine, but everything in the overworld just doesn't sit right. There is also a lack of Platinum version features which were missing too, such as the Distortion World and the Battle Frontier. Although these were pretty faithful remakes, I found it to be one that I have revisited less and less than the others. It's not a bad game, it's just okay. Coming in at number 4 is Sword and Shield. To me personally, this had the makings for a great Pokemon game, such as the starters, which I thought were all good looking Pokemon, and many of the other new Pokemon too. The region being based in the UK with lots of nods to beautiful settings, the front cover legendaries look great, and the special game feature Dynamaxing, which seemed pretty fun. Additionally, the wild area was something special as well, and a great place to explore for even more Pokemon. I had a great time in these games. They were, however, let down by some issues though. First being graphical and animation issues, where some of it just felt a little lazy in places. Many assets of the games felt like retreads of Sun and Moon, which to be honest, felt like it did a better job and was on an older, less powerful system. Not the worst thing in the world, as the games were fun, but the biggest complaint I have, and many people have had the same, were the lack of Pokemon being made available in the game. The developers stated there would have been too much more work for them and wanted to focus on the special features. The DLC helped out a little with the additions of new areas and increasing the list of available Pokemon, but it still was a little bit incomplete. At number 3, I have picked Violet and Scarlet. Now, these are interesting ones. There are some negatives with this one, as you might be aware, but I'll get into that in a bit. I found these games insanely fun to play. The addition of a fully open world Pokemon game is something fans have been patiently waiting for, and for the most part, it delivers. The world has different types of areas as you would expect in a Pokemon game. The new Pokemon are certainly interesting, and there are some standout ones in there too. You even get to travel on your own legendary Pokemon very early on in the game, which is a brilliant touch and just feels fun to do. The terrestrializing battle feature puts a new spin on battle strategy and was certainly a fun addition along with the added raid battles. I like the story for both versions and in my opinion were quite good, and they just hit the right spots. The DLC story that was added was also pretty good too. Now to the obvious thing that was a problem with this game was the performance of it. Now I haven't experienced as many of the bugs that I've seen online since the games were released, but one constant was always the frame rate. There were moments where it just slowed down in busy areas and it felt like the game was in alpha testing or something. Some updates have been added since the game's release which have certainly improved the game's performance, but it's far from perfect. For me personally, aside from those performance issues, the games and all the features included are pretty good and almost make up for all of those bugs, but only to a certain degree. If the game ran smoothly, this could almost be a perfect Pokemon game. Almost. Now, before we get to the final two, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video if you like the content. It would really mean a lot to me. But with that out of the way, let's get back to the video. At number 2, I have picked Legends Arceus. Now, this game just breaks the mold on many things a traditional Pokemon game does and turns them on its head. It was the first to introduce an open world feeling within a Pokemon game, and in many ways, I feel it does a lot better than Violet and Scarlet, which came after it. I love how this game looks and runs smoothly with little to no issues, at least in my experience. This makes the whole exploration aspects of the game so satisfying to play, especially as you go through the game and unlock the different varieties of Pokemon you can use to traverse the maps. Each unlock is more satisfying than the last. Of course, there are similarities to the Breath of the Wild series in terms of look and feel, but that isn't a bad thing, and to be honest, it perfectly suits a Pokemon game, at least this type of game. There's a great selection of Pokemon available in the game too, and the game mechanics are a little different to the usual formula of a Pokemon game, but it's a very welcome change, especially the updated catching mechanics. I love the difficulty and urgency the game has when you're trying to sneak up and catch a Pokemon. The narrative is set in the past in a land that will one day become the Sinnoh region from Generation 4. The story is very compelling, as so are the nods to the Gen 4 games. I thought this was a great touch. My only true gripe I really have with this game is that while the core mechanics are top notch, it can get a little samey in some aspects, almost to the point where the game does feel like it's repeating itself throughout. But other than that, this is a great start for where Pokemon should hopefully go in the future. And that means at number 1, I have chosen Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. What can I say? I'm a Gen 1 fan, seeing as I started playing Red and Blue when they came out, but not all of it is nostalgia tinted glasses for me with this game. In my opinion, this is the cleanest looking Pokemon game out of all of this list. The graphics just work. Everything is detailed and moves beautifully for the art style. Sure, there's some minor slowdown in some crowded areas or two, but nothing too terrible. The game is a faithful remake of the original games, mainly taken from Pokemon Yellow, but with some new additions and an updated presentation along with an amazing soundtrack with enough new touches to set itself apart. Now, I always felt this game was a stopgap, something easier to make and produce as a simple entry game for the Nintendo Switch when it came out just before Generation 8, but it didn't take away from the quality of the game. I still have fun playing this to this very day. Now, a big criticism the game has, which while I don't agree with but can understand, is how much Pokemon Go is implemented into the game with the catching mechanics. With the exceptions of a few, you don't fight any of the wild Pokemon. You have to use the throwing technique by using the motion controls either with the Joy-Con or the special Pokeball controller. I really didn't mind that, but the one thing I did mind was that if you were playing in docked mode, you had to use only one Joy-Con. You couldn't play using a Pro Controller if you have one. Again, not the end of the world, but it did take a little out of it for me. I really wanted to put Legends as the top spot on my list, but Let's Go to me just edges out for me in terms of replayability and easy pickup. So that's my thoughts on the mainline Pokemon games for Switch. I might do one for the spin-off games in the series too at some point down the line. So how about you? What would you rank as the best or worst Pokemon games for Switch? Let me know in the comments. But for now, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.